refrain from our usual. Welcome back to another episode of Conversation with the Columns. As always, she's your host, and I'm just directional support.
That's not true.
Well, it's true today. So, our
Mhm.
topic of discussion today is what?
You could call it relational intimacy or intimacy in marriage, particularly. Yes.
We'll give it an unofficial official title.
Yes.
Why 50-50 in relationships matter.
Well, that's good. That's a good title. I keep you around for a reason.
Well, semantics, I'm certain, but relational intimacy. So we communicate this in a really specific way, but begin to share your perspective on how this conversation kind of gets set up.
I think we coach individuals and then we also coach couples. And um, really, just I feel like it's just been learning kind of through our own journey. But I like to break it down between emotional intimacy, spiritual intimacy, and then physical intimacy. And I think when you have those three components, yes, I often say when you have the emotional intimacy and the spiritual intimacy, then the physical intimacy, it's like a bonus. Can get into that more later. Then I think oftentimes society gets that backwards.
And what do you mean by that?
They get the physical intimacy ahead of the other 2.
Sure.
Yeah,
Well, what is also oftentimes the approach for most people is getting their needs met on their own terms.
mhm,
In the practical sense, physical intimacy, we don't even have to make that sexual. A hug, a
mhm,
physical touch dynamic is definitely considered lower stakes than me opening up to you vulnerably, communicating about what's happening inside of me emotionally.
for sure.
And then secondarily, our worldview directly related to our spiritual belief system takes vulnerability to another level.
Yes, we've dialogued this often. I when we were even early on in our marriage, sometimes the spiritual intimacy part can still be my most vulnerable place. And so just having the courage. And so I think even before we do a deep dive, just intimacy, and we've heard this over and over, but it kind of that breakdown of into me you see. And
Mhm.
intimacy is just having the courage to really let someone see what is going on inside of you and kind of your innermost beings of you. And yeah, and it's terrifying, it's so terrifying if we didn't grow up in an environment where you were received for showing up your true authentic self, then it can be really scary to allow someone to really see that. Um,
Yes, I very much agree with the latter statement. To say that it's terrifying, I might not necessarily push back on, but I think it goes back to our family of origin story. I
for sure.
wonder if we would have a whole bunch of emotionally mature and healthy young adults moving into knowing how to get their needs met in a healthy way if engaging in a marriage would
Mhm.
feel as high risk or as vulnerable as it oftentimes does, because most of the time, and this was true for us, we had definitely gotten on the journey of becoming emotionally healthy and mature, but it wasn't like we were giving those tools when we were young and learned how to navigate all of that.
Not at all.
So,
Yeah. No, yes, I'm in agreement with you. Like if you're raised in an environment where it's safe to be fully seen and known, and it's safe to open up and be vulnerable, then it might not be as scary as if you're someone that didn't have the tools and it could be scary.
right.
And not even family of origin, but even previous relationships, and you haven't done the work to heal from and things like that, for sure. I'm in agreement with that. Yeah, we know that humans connect through vulnerability, and I do believe that it takes courage to be vulnerable. So I think you can be a really, really healthy and emotionally mature person, and vulnerability still takes courage.
Correct. I'm
Yeah.
not disagreeing on that statement.
Yeah.
I just wanna be careful that we don't paint pictures to an upcoming generation that if they they did have really healthy upbringings and were emotionally mature.
Mhm.
Relationship has challenge. It doesn't matter who you are.
Mhm.
It doesn't inherently matter how you qualify it per se, whether it's spouse, whether it's parent child, whether it's sibling, family, close
Mhm.
friend. Relationship requires intentionality. And without intentionality, we can see where some of these things begin to get in the way back to the original point. So, in addition to just talking about personal needs, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, you and I also coach people in three categories of life being your personal life, your professional life, and your spiritual life. So I have to slow my mind down enough because I want to go to those three categories versus emotionally these three categories,
Mhm.
but explain, if you will, or just give some more context as to why you feel like these are really three distinct areas for a relational connection.
Yeah, well, again, I believe we're created body, soul, spirit, um, and soul being our mind, will, and emotions. And I think we were created to connect in all three of those areas of our lives:
Well, which three?
body, physically; soul, emotionally; mind, will, emotions; and then spiritually.
Okay. Good
Um,
job tying those together.
so that's the way I break it down because I believe that's the way that we were created. We're created in the image of God. I believe we were created to in those kind of three parts, and all three parts function as one person.
Yeah, and again, not to make this a preach, but we do see that there is biblical precedent to back this up on account of Adam in the garden, and God communicates in Genesis, "Hey, it's not good for man to be alone." There
Mhm.
is a dynamic in that that very much we believe facilitates this whole point.
Yes, yeah. You're the Bible scholar, so
Well, I don't know that I would say that I'm a Bible scholar, but you and I are always wanting to make sure that where we're coming from is sound. And it's not just an idea, it's not just a philosophy. And so that would be more of the anchoring context to this, in that
Mhm,
what the Bible doesn't definitively lay out is how long it was from the time that Adam was created until the time that he communed with God in the garden, named all the animals, all of creation. Like, we read that without the awareness of considering how long that timeline could have been.
mhm.
That being said, I can't imagine that you could go through creation, naming everything, identifying it, giving it order, class, phylum, kingdom, all the fun things, and then somehow magically decide that God shows up and says, "It's not good for you to be by yourself," which could take my mind to a completely different thought, which is purpose, right?
Yes.
But but I do believe that in purpose, we are created to have connection,
Yes.
and even fundamentally created to have connection emotionally, in addition to the follow-up declaration in the garden was, "Be fruitful and multiply."
Mhm.
So, in the original design, we were created to procreate, which very much facilitates getting our needs met reproductively. So, what we then see a lot of, though, and in our present dynamic, is you see a lot of people trying to get a physical need met in a very controlling way, unhealthy way. It's the reason that porn's such a huge addiction process for so
For
many people,
sure.
male
Yeah,
or female,
correct.
because there are aspects of practical needs that we were designed in that are still supposed to be met
Yes.
in healthy ways. But I love the way you describe that, because oftentimes humanity has a tendency to start at the lowest level rather than the highest.
Mhm.
And so when we don't align spiritually, then
Mhm.
chances are our safety and our emotional consideration around that gets a bit more unstable. So then we drop down to, well, let's just treat this interaction. And I want to be careful how I say this because I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but it's the reason that prostitution exists.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get my need met. It's conditional. It's
Yes.
not committed. It's just an ends to a means to an end.
Yes.
And so
No intimacy involved,
right.
right, outside of physical. Right.
So as you alluded, especially if we are interacting with couples, there's always a really big conversation around how much do you let your spouse really know you, and what does that look like on your belief system spiritually, emotionally, and then least of which is physically. Because again, I think that's aligning physical needs doesn't really take a lot.
Right.
We were pre-designed to work together.
Yes. Yeah, but I think oftentimes what happens, a and I don't wanna make this gender specific, just if you, were raised well, if you didn't feel like you had a lot of value, like if you weren't fully seen and known and celebrated for who you were, and then if you were only celebrated or felt celebrated in a physical sense, either pre-marriage or in a marriage, but you're not feeling fully seen emotionally and valued emotionally or feeling fully seen spiritually and valued for the spiritual being that you are, then that it just really begins to distort what intimacy is. And then you will see some couples be married for years, and all of a sudden the wife has all these resentments around physical because of the lack of intimacy and value that she feels emotionally and spiritually. I don't want to just put it gender specific. It could go either
Sure.
way, but oftentimes I think religion, society as a whole has kind of put that emphasis on women. There are male prostitutes too, but most of the time, I would say there's probably more female prostitutes than male prostitutes. And just the way that women have been oppressed that way. So I think it goes back to, well, let's just break it down a little bit like emotionally, which we're big on that, connecting. Well, we're big on all three. Connecting emotionally. How do you feel like we are intentional about connecting emotionally?
I would say that there's probably a couple of aspects to this. For me, I am always coming back to asking myself, how much am I honoring the non-negotiables
Mm.
to this relationship? So if you go back to the very first episode, we were talking about how we even got together, being that we're a blended family. Before I pursued another relationship coming out of a divorce, I realized I didn't really have healthy expectations
Mhm.
on a relationship, let alone the emotional awareness to let somebody know truly what was going on within myself. I was really good at talking about problems, but not necessarily talking about myself. And so I love the way that you always reference this and have very much helped me be mindful. There is a real specific difference between being transparent and vulnerable. That isn't the topic. The topic is trying to get more about the particulars of being physically, emotionally, and spiritually intimate with one another.
Mhm.
But I say that in order to try to give context. Um,
'Cause you can't again, you can't really have intimacy without vulnerability.
and so transparency, which is what you and I oftentimes see a lot of people adept in, is telling you about the story
Mhm.
rather than about what's going on inside of them.
Yep.
And again, the story doesn't really cost you anything, especially if it's just so ingrained as a part of you, you dialogue it like it is a part, which is a whole different conversation. Back on point. For me, thinking about our non negotiables, self growth was very much one of those.
Mhm.
That was underneath the spiritual commitment of we each were solely responsible for our own spiritual journey.
Mhm.
What I particularly mean by that is too often we can end up making presumptions towards somebody that we care about, whether it's spouse, whether it's parent, child, doesn't matter. My experience feels really real and how I process to me, but it may not really resonate with you. And so if I'm not careful, if I project my expectations or my needs even into your dynamic, I have no longer kept this relationship in balance, which is back to a 50-50. So I caveat to say I'm 100% responsible for 50% of this relationship. And then equally, you are 100% responsible for 50% of this relationship. But I say that specifically to even our spiritual journey, not that there can't be times where a person comes into a marriage, which was, we talked about this. This was the case for my parents. My mom came in as a believer, my dad wasn't. I'm not saying that that can't happen. But what you get into is there's an Ephesians 5 conversation about the man being the head of the house and the way, as you alluded to, that sort of gets perverted and or unhealthily stewarded because men may not be emotionally healthy enough to meet other people in the dynamic, so then they become prone to dictating how things happen rather than partnering in how things happen.
Yeah.
So for me, my emotional communication with you is growing in my ability to say, "Hey, right now I'm feeling sad," or "I'm feeling lonely," or "I'm feeling fear," "I'm feeling joy," "I'm feeling," the 8 core emotions
Mhm.
that we have. It's not that we can't communicate other emotions, but specifically for guys, I know this to be very true. Guys aren't good at identifying what they're feeling anyway. So if we keep it to these are the core emotions, get good at that first, and then we can communicate these other ones.
Yeah.
Anxiousness is something that you can say that you feel, but it's oftentimes directly related to probably fear
Sure.
or maybe some other shame, guilt
Mhm.
dynamics in the core emotions that we've just miscategorized. So that's a long way around to back to me. In addition to wanting to be better at communicating what I'm feeling, also having a value system for feedback in our house is a bit of the way that that can be navigated. So in times that you come up and say, "Hey, it feels like you're not doing very well, or that you're off, or that or even just asking how I'm feeling," that becomes permission to stop. And sometimes we don't even realize it, right? Sometimes I
Yeah.
can be so in my head. I even told you this today. I was out there working with horses. You come out, "How you doing?" And I'm just in my head.
Mm.
And that's what I said. I'm in my head. Well, that can mean a lot of different things. But what I'm learning to do is want to be careful that I don't immediately just start talking because I have a lot of intensity in that. When I'm processing, I get too literal at times or too direct or too, and I say that with grace, but because I am working with young horses, I probably show up over overly strong. As soon as you come out and you're wanting to connect, it has to be conscious for me to say, if my problem solving techniques in the round pen didn't go very well, you're the last person I want that frustration to be pointed towards. And so I use that real time just trying to articulate being really honest in the moment
Yeah.
and giving you space to ask curious questions if that may not be very clear to you,
Mhm.
but learning how we can best enter into that vulnerability with one another is also the way that continues to grow for us. Because this year will be our 10-year,
Yeah.
right? And it's still, as we go through different seasons, we go through different iterations of ourselves. And so
Mhm.
learning that new iteration of ourselves,
Mhm.
it just requires intentionality. So I think me weighing whatever fear might be showing up between you and I, or perceived disconnect, or, you know, however I might be struggling
Mhm.
to weigh it back through those non-negotiables is a way that I try to anchor myself to what's true versus what am I feeling.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think too when you were talking about the 50-50 part, we hear this a lot in coaching is, well, they made me feel, and it's a hard habit to break, but in reality no one can make you feel anything.
Right.
They're just bumping up against previous hurts.
For sure.
And so when we go back to that 50-50 part, learning how to articulate, like, hey, I'm feeling disconnected and it's bumping up against um I'm not worth connecting to, or I'm not worthy of connection or whatever. I like just being able to articulate that, which is still, we're still practicing it. Like even you saying in the round pen, like for you to just say, "Oh, I'm frustrated. I'm up in my head. I'm frustrated with this horse today," or whatever, right? Or I'm frustrated with this circumstance, then that gives me permission to stay curious and safe instead of, but oftentimes I think even in that environment, we see it all the time. People get frustrated and then they're blaming everyone around them for their frustration.
Well, yeah, I mean, the practicality of today is our main round pen is behind a whole nother barn. There's a small window in it. You were on a coaching call. The expectation from me to assume that you ought to know because you're in proximity is really foolish of me. It would be really immature that I would have an expectation for you to know something that you weren't even around for,
Right.
which is what we see a lot of in unhealthy relationships, which takes us back to the power and control games that we talked about
Yeah.
a couple episodes ago, right? Like
Yeah.
blame shifting shows up incessantly around our emotions.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think that's where the intimacy part comes from instead of blame shifting, which goes back to the garden too. But instead of blame shifting, it's just saying, okay, hey, there's actually whatever I just experienced. Now I'm feeling this, and allowing the person across from us to see what's going on inside of us. And that takes a lot more courage and a lot more intentionality, like you mentioned, instead of just blaming everybody else for what you're experiencing.
So as you pose the question, how do I process the emotional part? What would
Mhm.
you say for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it still takes pause. I will just recognize those emotions when they come up, right? Like if it's frustration or fear or anger or disconnection or whatever, like just recognize it. And then I just begin to ask myself, okay, hey, I'm feeling disconnected. What caused the disconnection? Like what caused what let's I call it play it backwards. So I'm feeling this. What was the original thought? When did this thought happen? And then I can pinpoint, oh, when that was said, or oh, when that happened, or and then I can go back. I've done enough work now that I can usually attach it to, oh, that bumps up against this, right? This that bumps up against this old hurt or whatever. But still, if I it's up to me to go and number 1, identify what I need and then have the courage to ask for it. So, "Hey, I'm feeling disconnected. I need some connection. I need to feel connected. I need to feel like I'm a priority. I need to feel like you value me. I really want this right now." Is that making sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
For me, though, I would say it's not always communicating the opposite of what I'm feeling. This has been a conversation that you and I've had where I'm learning this part. It's really important for me to just have space to tell you what's going on rather than saying, I'm feeling this way. I'd rather feel this way.
Mhm.
That's less important to me than me just having space to tell you what I'm even feeling.
Yeah.
And that seems, again, this is a super generalization, which we don't like,
Mhm.
but that is more prevalent for men than it is for women.
Mhm.
I hear a lot of guys not having the capacity to even identify what's going on within themselves. If they were raised in a fairly controlling atmosphere, the courage or the vulnerability it takes to start talking about that stuff really is like Fort Knox.
I don't know if that's gender specific though at all.
Well, I'm only a guy. I will only ever be a man, a guy with a Y chromosome. That's the way that God created this. So I only know it through that lens. I definitely have a lot of experience around females, but I also don't believe that it is fair that we relegate men to not being capable of communicating what's going on inside of them. I mean, that will always be one of my soapboxes.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But I do believe that there is a societal assumption that creates a different dynamic for women to communicate what they're feeling or what's going on in them more readily than men at times.
Yeah.
which takes us back to especially the spiritual conversation, because though I can agree with the sentiment in Ephesians 5 of leading the house, dictating that is really a challenging conversation. And so let's jump into the spiritual part of connection. What do you feel like makes the spiritual connection so relevant to either emotionally or even physically?
Well, I believe we're more spiritual than we are the other 2, and so it's the majority part of who we are. Um, and for me, yes, Jesus I'm a Jesus follower, and my relationship with him, it's pretty tight and pretty
Like your BFF type? Okay,
but it was if there hasn't been a safe place to share my experience, my relationship with Jesus, the way he communicates with me, the way that yeah, the my experience with him, if there wasn't a safe place to process that, then no one would ever really know that side of me, which is the biggest part of me, the majority of me. And so because it was one of our non-negotiables, we had space. I felt safe to begin to share, hey, this is my experience. And this is what I experienced with Jesus. And this is my spiritual journey. And this is the way I encounter him. And so having space to process that and it not being judged and me feeling fully seen and known in that and even celebrated, I feel like you've done an amazing job about like even celebrating because you and I experience Jesus really differently.
for sure.
And so the way that for me, just even having the space to say, this is what I encountered today, and then that being met not only not with judgment, but being celebrated, that, yeah, I feel super seen and uh, known. And I feel like even the Ephesians 5 conversation around the head of the house stuff too is, or the spiritual leader, I feel like you and I honor each other well in that way. And I feel very celebrated in what I bring spiritually to the relationship and the family and not squashed or dictated to what you said.
Would you want to explore the nuance of that more, or where would you wanna go in that conversation?
Help me
Well, I just
understand.
think about I think in conjunction with emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence is a whole category itself.
Mhm.
And what I don't feel like a lot of people are very versed in
Mm,
for themselves is even understanding how God might communicate with them,
mm,
let alone maybe some of the attributes with which Holy Spirit likes to interact with them, communicate through them, work through them,
mhm.
you know. So there's a dynamic in that you and I are both passionate around
For
that
sure.
that really encompasses the spiritual awareness that we
Mhm.
carry
Yeah.
that then allows us to communicate that with one another. So
Yeah.
the thing that I've always loved about you is you carry an amazing amount of faith.
Mm. Thank you.
And there's a grace on you to be reminded of big picture. Whereas I often am so linear and so black and white that I will get really frustrated when it doesn't make sense. And I am often needing to borrow your faith in times that I wouldn't say scream at God, but from what I hear and what I understand to what's happening are so far apart that it can be really frustrating. And so I think that's the reason that I posed the question the way I did is because learning the real attributes of another person allows you to value the way that they're trying to communicate back to you something that you may not understand, but you can at least honor and choose to partner with whether or not it's the way that it would resonate within yourself. Because to me, that takes us into the impetus of covenant. When we exchanged our vows, we said yes to something that we didn't fully understand,
For sure.
even though you and I had been
Still
married
don't
before.
fully understand all of it. Yeah.
Sure. Even though we had
Yeah.
been through a marriage before,
Mhm.
and we knew that there were certain things that we wanted to do different.
Mhm.
I knew that there were areas that I could grow in and get better in. there's still things as life happens
Mhm.
that you can't equip yourself for. It requires faith.
Mhm.
But I use this analogy frequent. If a person believes in God, that requires them to also believe that every single person and every single entity that bears life holds a unique attribute of God that isn't duplicated. So, because of that, then even though I don't always understand what you're sharing, I can get curious about it because I believe the God in you.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I think it similarly, I know this to be true is I'm such a big feeler. Like I just feel really big. And so a lot of times that could be good or bad and healthy or unhealthy, but really relying on your truth and your compass. I call it kind of your compass of truth and just saying, "Hey, I'm experiencing this," or even things I've experienced or seen. It's like, "Hey, is this biblical? Show me where biblically this makes sense." And so I think it's beautiful how God put us together and it's been such a fun journey. And so I think that's been beautiful, vulnerable.
What would, to that end, let's use the dynamic that somebody might be more committed spiritually or more dedicated spiritually.
Mm,
I want to keep that language a little ambiguous for a reason.
sure.
But one person has a different value system spiritually than the other. As you begin to work with them, what would be something that you would like to see happen in that relationship? What would you communicate?
Yeah. Whether their spouse receives them or not. I don't get my value and worth from you. So my value and worth emotionally, I know I'm a valuable person regardless if you receive me emotionally or not. Whether I'm seen by you or not, I still have this conviction of I am a valuable and worthy person. Do I want to be seen by you? Yes, because I want to be connected to you. I want you to see me, right? That's how we connect is when we see one another and vice versa. And so I think it even goes back to spiritually. I have a very strong conviction of my value and worth in my good daddy's eyes. When I am most secure in how my Abba sees me, I'm not afraid or as afraid to be more vulnerable and say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing.
Right.
It's coming from a place of love instead of fear. I want you to really see how good he is. I'm wanting the person across from me to really understand what I'm experiencing. I call it the overflow, right? You're just so in love with God that you can't help but just ooze it out and you want the people around you to experience it. So I'm not going to be afraid to share it, which I think, yeah, that goes back to all aspects, either emotionally or spiritually or physically. It's if I love that scripture again. Perfect love casts out all fear because fear has to do with punishment. When I am so secure in love and perfect love that I am valuable no matter outside of my performance, that I am valuable and worthy outside of what I do.
Yeah, I think that statement helps. Well, I would say it gives the context as to why we would delineate these the way that we do. And so, as a spirit entity, there is a measure of obedience, but there is never a measure of performance.
But I think obedience for me even comes from obedience becomes way easier when you know that you have somebody that has your best interest in mind. You want to do
For sure.
what they ask you to do. Yeah.
But I'm saying that intentionally because the follow up statement is we're okay with being obedient when we're okay with who we are.
Mhm.
Like we would just naturally want to be abiding in the ask when we're secure with who we are.
And who he is. Yep.
But again, back to scripture, we can only do that because we receive what he says about us.
Right.
More specifically, the scripture says, we love because he first loved us, right? So I am a person that loves to break this down
Mhm.
to all the head case people out there that want this really black and white. But when two people are the most unaligned spiritually, you can be as emotionally intelligent as you want to be, and you can be as physically connected as you want to be, but you will not feel secure. because you are not being fully received or even validated in a belief system that is required by faith. So if in the belief system, faith becomes really uh, I wouldn't say a disqualifier, but definitely a disconnect between two people, then what you're saying is your bridge sucks and I won't cross it. That's the way I would communicate that, which takes me back to our advocation for people to really get a secure belief system. Not that we're trying to punch holes in what it is, but if it doesn't include truth, then you will still perform for love, i.e., to connect.
Yeah, I yes, I'm a big believer that God is love, like, and love is more powerful than fear. And if you're not partnering with love, then you're partnering with fear. And so I think that for me breaks it down. And we can only love someone to the capacity that we receive love. You can't give something you don't have. And so kind of back to your point, we love because he first loved us. I can only love you to the degree that I receive love for myself. And not that it's
Would you say only to the degree that you receive it or believe it? Or do you think that there's any difference?
really feel that yeah, I don't really separate the 2, but you may get more nuanced in the word than I would be, but believe it, receive it.
The only reason why I say it is because if we go back to our original statement, our thoughts control our emotions and our
Yeah.
emotions control our actions, then I can usually tell when somebody believes it versus what they're just trying to say it.
I was about to I mean, I'm a big feeler, so again, when I think about, um, we love because he first loved us, like, I just feel this overwhelming love, and then I wanna, reciprocate it, and it just oozes out.
I don't know why my head went here, but on account of the power and control games, I've watched people at times show up as what we call takers. And so when you use the term receive, like I see a lot of people that are so starved out that they'll receive it, but they don't believe it, which is the only reason why I delineate it kind of that way.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. I just like to ask those curious questions on account of taking people into maybe some more exploration within themselves of, are you saying that because it's the right thing to say? Or are you saying it because that's really your conviction? And back to the statement, we can't give away anything that we don't have. Well, that's true about
Mhm.
what we believe about ourselves,
Mhm.
which takes us back to the hierarchy of the spiritual connection in a relationship. We would contend, you and I, is of most importance because that's where our identity comes from.
Mhm. Yeah, that for sure. That's yes.
And if that isn't really understood
Mhm.
within ourselves first, let alone articulated or communicated or demonstrated to another person, then metaphorically, at the end of the day, we're just waiting for somebody to come home and unzip from their costume that they put on as a facade because what they're showing you isn't at all what you're getting.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that's the part of, I think, even looking at spiritual ideologies, we see so many different denominations because they can't agree on a fundamental belief system, which is God is good. He's for us. Some of those aren't even viable connecting points within denominations.
I'm a big believer that God is better than we can even imagine, and He adores us, and we're all created in His image. And
I'm not,
so,
I'm not zipping up to self protect. I'm just
I don't want to get in a debate around that, but I know whenever I am believing that to be true, and that I am created in His image, so therefore that's who I am, I show up way better.
for sure. Yeah.
Way healthier. I don't wanna say better, way healthier and more loving and kind and generous and
Yes. This is
patient.
relatably to you. I find this rabbit trail
Mhm.
because, again, our thoughts control our emotions control our actions.
Mhm.
And we just so happen to live in an area with a lot of diversity around religious belief systems.
Mhm.
And most of those are not very diverse. They're just way more nuanced than they need to be. That being said, I believe, and this is my one little caveat where I'm not gonna chase this rabbit, but I do wanna say this. I've never understood the term Christian apologetics because I don't believe that Jesus needs defending,
Yeah.
but religion will always get into arguments. And so that's the one thing that when you and I got acquainted initially and communicated non-negotiables, having your own relationship with Jesus. There was a measure of peace that I landed in around that, recognizing that though our upbringing and our experience around church and around, let's say, religion was different, there was definitely things that you have brought into this relationship that have allowed me to learn things that I would never have learned without your experience because we get really good at living in these silos that limit or mitigate how challenged our belief system is.
Mm,
I'm not saying that we need to live with a whole bunch of people that are constantly at our gates beckoning us to defend all of that.
mhm,
That's not what I'm saying. I am saying we can live so comfortably at times within like-mindedness that when somebody comes up and asks, "What is your position on that and why?" we may not even realize how much that's adopted.
mhm,
I know that very much to be true for me. There was a lot of things, even emotionally, like, we don't even have to keep that in a spiritual category. Emotionally, we know that is very much something that happens in our childhood. But there are so many times that we witness people having to unpack a lie that they believe about themselves based on what somebody said, intentionally or unintentionally. At that formative age, that 5 to 7 mark is where so much of that experience, especially when you think about kids going to school. What are your peers saying? What are your teachers saying? How you're treated in those environments. They may not be the most influential person, but anybody that carries a measure of access to you has influence. And so it was just a reference to the statement more than
yeah. Yeah, we definitely took a rabbit trail on that one, but it's good. It's all connected. It's hard to separate it for sure. Um, yeah, I think back to the spiritual intimacy is just have even dialogue this, like praying for one another can be vulnerable at times. Like whenever and we do that often, but there are times where it just feels more vulnerable. And it could be just the content we're praying about or just the space we're in or maybe we haven't felt connected. Yeah, I think even couples learning how to pray for one another and pray together can be a vulnerable experience.
together for sure.
Mhm.
I mean, I know that's been one of
Yeah, that's what
our conversations
yeah.
because when you say pray for one another, I think about the times that you may communicate something to me and I would contend for you with you in that.
Yes, and vice versa. I meant like praying, like you pray for me often like in my presence and I pray for you in when we're together.
Right. And so instead of it sounding like we're having an active dialogue, we're actually in intercession,
Yes. Yeah.
which is just a point of clarity because I do believe that a lot of times it would be easy to take the checklist, the recommendations, the prayer requests. Cool, I've got that. I'm going to go over here. And then however we go about that. No, that's not my, there's no judgment in that statement other than if you don't hear from me, contend for you. It would be equivalent to somebody walking up and me not wanting to advocate for you
Mhm.
if they choose not to see you.
Mhm. Yeah. I think even intimacy in friendships and parent child, like I think it goes that way too. How many times most often as someone says, "Hey, will you pray for me?" I don't just say yes, I will just pray for them. Whether I send them a text, pray for them right then, which takes courage, but I feel like that is people feel more seen and more valued when we offer that space for them. And I feel like the world is hungry for more of that. I've often had lots of people say, I don't remember the last time someone did that. Like, they'll say, "I'll pray for you," or, "Will you pray for me?" "Yeah, I'll pray for you." but you never hear what they pray.
Mm.
And so that's just I try to be really intentional. If someone ever has the courage to say, "Hey, will you pray for me?" that they get to hear me pray for them.
I would follow up to that only because I know you and I have witnessed this, but it's more than just praying for them. There's an active dialogue, inquiring around the reason for the ask. I mean, that may go without saying, right? But to that end, again, I'm over here going, well, if this isn't clarified, then the Christianese shows up a lot. And somebody walks up, asks for prayer. Here's a man or woman of God that's going to pray, but they don't ever ask the person what for. They just go to town. And
Oh,
and all
yeah.
of a sudden, that person doesn't feel any more known or heard or seen because this person didn't even really get intimate.
Oh, yeah. No, my curiosity kicks in and I ask a lot of questions.
I know that.
Yeah.
That wasn't inherently the way that that was
Yeah.
presented, so I
Yeah.
wanted to take pause because that ends up being something that fascinates me oftentimes
Yeah.
with a lot of people, whether it be specific to a prayer or just partnering in needs.
Yeah.
Somebody might articulate what, "I need a breakthrough. Man, I've got an interview. Keep me in your thoughts," however
Yeah.
ambiguous somebody wants to be even around their own spirituality.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter to me. But when people are asking for partnership, what I don't think that they understand oftentimes is how vague they are in the ask. And so if we don't get curious to
Mm-mm.
maybe invite them to communicate a little bit more on the specifics of what they would be wanting in that,
Mhm.
then it's easy for them to blame all these other dynamics because they didn't have the courage to be, how should we just say, articulate enough. That sounds like an indictment to people that don't
Yeah.
use their words well. But I think what I love going back to scripture is Jesus was always curious, even in people coming up to him making
Mhm.
requests.
Mhm. "What do you want?" He would ask a lot, "What do you want?"
So
Uh,
in the conversation around spirituality, I can think about the times where even just in the difference between you and
mhm.
I was telling you this recently. I don't recall my parents specifically praying for me a lot. I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying I don't have a ton of memories
Yeah.
where in the way that you and I have interceded and contended for all of our kids in different ways
Mhm.
with them in front of us or just partnering with them. There are times, back to my statement earlier about borrowing your faith, I am surprised at times how comforting I find you praying over me real time becomes.
Yeah.
And again, if we're not careful, because I know that I don't carry all of God in our house. Back to the husband father dynamic of the Bible that I think gets, there's precedent for it, but I think it gets perverted.
For sure.
And so all of a sudden, now we're back into the receiving conversation. Well, you want to pray for me. You have wanted to partner with me. If I don't have the humility to say, which you've heard me at times, I don't even know what to say. And you just start praying, how comforting that is for me to feel the relief of it not just being my responsibility.
Yeah, and biblically, I don't think it is.
I don't disagree,
Yeah.
but what I see a lot in the dynamics is the absence of vulnerability to pray real time with one another, especially our spouses. The formality of praying over dinner and meals, and it's kind of, oh, that's acceptable, that's practical, that's commonplace. But if there might be personal struggles or
Mhm.
real like, man, that just sucks.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with that. Having a spouse begin to just intercede real time in that moment, there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think even processing it more, maybe why it does feel more vulnerable in those moments is because for me, prayer isn't a formality. It really is a conversation that I'm having with the creator of the universe. And so I'm allowing someone into that space of my dialogue with, yeah, with the creator of the universe. And it's very intimate for me and very real time. And so whenever I have the courage to pray for someone, they're actually getting it's not the Lord's Prayer, not that there's anything wrong with the Lord's Prayer, I'm just saying they're getting my real-time interaction
Mm.
with with Jesus.
This also came to mind. I have seldom heard children reference their appreciation for their dad praying for years for them.
I hope I have shared my appreciation for my both of my parents.
No, no, you gotta hear me out.
Yeah, okay.
Most of the time in public declarations, and you can hear this maybe in big celebratory moments, athletes, musicians, you know, big
I hear you.
platforms.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there may not have been a father figure around. What I find interesting is that seldom do you hear a child reference their dad praying for them.
Mm,
You frequently hear them reference their mother praying for them,
mhm,
especially when you hear people who have left faith or strayed away from faith and come back. There is a really strong recognition and admiration for a praying mother.
mhm.
I don't often hear. I just bring that up because I remember hearing a clip recently from, I don't know if it was a Grammys or one of the recent whatever, because you and I are so pop culture. But here's what's really funny. It was KB, who is a Christian hip hop artist.
I didn't even know that, so thanks.
Yeah. I am a little bit versed in that, mildly, contrary to what you see. But he very much was verbally, honoring his mom
Mm,
for the years of prayer and intercession and dedicating that award to her
mm,
as he navigated his journey of moving away from faith and how hard she contended for him. Again, I don't know his personal upbringing story. I'm just
yeah.
referencing that was really fresh in my memory as we get to talking about this. And in my own experience, I'm not saying that my dad never prayed for me. I'm not saying I mean, obviously my mom
Mm,
was a huge intercession, but I think it just sets up against the reality that if we are the most fatherless generation to exist in all of eternity up until this point, it would make sense to me why you don't hear kids say, "My dad prayed for me."
yeah.
Again, I'm just loosely connecting some things, but I say that specific to men because in our own marriage, I have had a significant amount of not only comfort, but value in you praying over me or for me real time to the point that we're not meant to do it by ourselves. And that's not in lieu of saying, okay, here might be a group of men that I'm able to share those requests with and we pray for one another. I'm not dismissing that, but I do want to just highlight the way a woman prays and the way a man prays is not the same. And so there's going to be things that you bring to the table because you're a woman, because you're a wife, because you're a mother.
Yeah.
Those are things I can never replicate.
Yeah, I think it goes beyond even gender specific, but I think it's so individual. Like I've heard that every person's hallelujah is just as unique as their thumbprint. And so I think that's the same with our prayers, just because I truly believe God communicates to all of us so uniquely. And so I feel like it doesn't matter if it's a male or female, every person is going to bring their unique attribute to God into the way that they pray for someone else.
Yeah. No, I can agree with that too.
Yeah. I definitely wanna honor both of my parents, my mom and my dad. I'm so grateful I have experienced both of them praying over me and for me in real time, and so grateful for that experience. Yeah, I think too, there was a season where I was spiritually exhausted, emotionally exhausted, and you would pray for me and I'd fall asleep. And, yeah, and so just when you talk about the comfort, like, I remember that season just finally it was you were literally just praying until I fell asleep, and it was so comforting and just so, um, yeah, just so grateful to have a spouse that would do that for me too.
Which also required me to acknowledge that your response wasn't anything to do with my partnership. So the
Mhm.
first couple times that happened, that was hard. because I'm like, you had
Oh, yeah.
asked me to pray for you, and I barely can get into a couple sentences, and no lie, you were out. But what I began to understand, and some of this was because God was helping me see it that way too, your need for a first Psalm tangibility was so high.
It was legit.
And so there was this interesting journey of the Lord helping me see that there is a part of me that He created that brings that to the table. And so we would lay down and you would ask for me to pray over you, and then you would be out. But it took a minute for me to know that that wasn't an indictment nor a passive ask on your part,
No, it was a
which goes back to the reason it is important for us to be really good with ourselves in these journeys, or else it would be easy for us to take offense and or find rejection towards the way that we're trying to partner with one another's needs.
yeah, because what I was experiencing, I would just finally experience peace and safety, and my literally, my nervous system would finally relax enough to go to sleep, and so I was able to just let down spiritually and physically and just rest,
Yeah.
and so it was really a sweet time.
If you'd like to know what she's talking about, jump back to the prior episode, Her Time Inside.
Which was a beautiful time, but it wasn't easy. Yeah. So I think that yeah, goes back to the spiritual intimacy part that we're talking about. And even yeah, that takes a lot of vulnerability to be it takes vulnerability to say, hey, I'm feeling even yeah, exhausted in this area and I need backup. I need support. I need
Yeah.
encouragement. I need to just rest. And so yeah. So emotionally, we've talked about it's really important that we just communicate what's going on inside of us without blaming the other person. Like, hey, this is what's going on inside of me. That's what emotional vulnerability looks like. And then having the courage to ask for what you need in those situations from the other person. And it can be just as vulnerable for the other person to meet that need as it is the person to ask for it. And then spiritually, just having the courage to really allow the other people to see what I call it just my relationship with Jesus. They get like a front row seat into kind of what that looks like and how cool that's been for you and me to yeah, I consider it such a privilege to get to see the way that God interacts with you, and so that's so fun. It's so different than the way he interacts with me. And then so for me, I think the physical part then, if I feel safe in those other 2, the physical part is it's I always say then it's really pretty amazing and brings a depth to the physical part that you can't get without the other 2 aspects. And that's why I'm a huge advocate of, hey, connect emotionally, connect spiritually, and then physically connect. And we've even really honored, or I'll say for you, you have really honored my ask in that if we're not emotionally and spiritually connected. You've been really honoring and saying, let's take pause and connect those 2 ways.
I just don't think it works.
It
I
doesn't.
don't I don't know how many guys would have that awareness. I'm not here to police that, but it very much feels like prostitution to me otherwise.
Yeah.
Sex in general has always been so skewed and relegated to a man's needs being met and a woman suffering through that, or, figuring it out herself, or, that's just a whole nother topic that isn't this one. But the dynamic of me saying, I am going to physically connect with you when I can tell that there isn't necessarily a level of connection almost makes it impossible for me to even entertain it.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't work. So
I've been really grateful
I don't
for you.
I don't think that it's supposed to work,
Mhm.
but I also don't want to make a statement that feels indicting to anybody,
Mhm.
because that's also not the point. But I think it goes back. You said this early in the conversation. I do believe that there are a lot of women that feel like it is their duty,
For sure.
and that so attacks emotional safety.
And spiritual safety. Yeah.
Sure, but even if you just try to take these one at a time,
Yeah. I think too, if men understood that if they would put be intentional about connecting emotionally and spiritually with their wives, what that would actually do for their sex life, I think they would have more I
fireworks.
think they would have more motivation to do that.
This is
So
where we need some bunny rabbits.
I just not got it a little. Yeah, yeah. But yes, like, I think I really do. I think it's and to me, that is a true representation of covenant,
Mm.
and, it just gets so distorted and out of alignment with the way I think we were created to function in relationship, especially covenant relationship.
Any other final thoughts on relationship?
Yeah, you can't control the other person. I don't know if that's been said. I say this all the time. I cannot control the other person. I can only control myself on a good day. Like, and so we see that often people trying to control the other person, and it's never going to work.
Well, I think there's even a lot of conversation that could be explored here in this topic that isn't intended, but the passivity of manipulation in a relationship can show up in a way that will we will see somebody trying to do something to get another person's agreement, which is the reason that the 50-50 dialogue is something that we advocate. Where this hit me was early when we were coaching with horses. And I can remember when that whole dialogue came out of my mouth, I communicated it without realizing what I'd said, which I would attribute to, Holy Spirit. But the dynamic itself was set up with a horse in such a really profound way that it was just a marked moment. So the backstory to all that is I can remember growing up, I remember hearing people and still hear people dialogue this way. A relationship is never 50-50. Sometimes it's going to be 70-30, 60-40, whatever version of the equation. And I can understand some of the connotation of that statement. However, it has been my experience that most people use that to justify not managing their side.
Or rescuing, not managing their side. Yes. I was thinking not doing their part and then overdoing, trying to overdo.
It doesn't matter if you're on the 51 or the 49,
Yeah, you're not managing your side.
right? It's we both stand face to face at the 50-yard line.
Yep.
Now, again, Brené Brown has had some amazing dialogue around this, but I remember specifically seeing a clip where she would probably articulate different than what we are saying in this. And again, I can understand the connotation of where she's coming from.
It's negotiating needs.
Right. But if we're not careful, we'll take some of these parameters and we'll allocate them in justifications rather than, no, this is just a really healthy these are the frameworks that we're going to work in.
Yeah.
We can call that boundaries, we can call that healthy, we can call that a lot of different things.
Mhm.
But what isn't fair to say is that you're never 100% responsible for yourself. That would be where I come from in it.
Mm.
If anybody is never wanting to be 100% responsible for themselves, they are abdicating their responsibility. They
Mhm.
are avoiding taking ownership of managing themselves.
Yes. Yeah. I think I'd like to put like a maybe practical application to it so people understand. Like even in the season where I was asking you for prayer, I wasn't asking you to do my relationship with Jesus for me. I was saying, "Hey, I need partnership in this because I'm struggling."
For sure.
And so I think sometimes our 100% may look different from day to day, but I'm still responsible for
Right.
managing myself.
Yeah, because in that season, I know the times that you got up, the amount of time that you vested in wanting to make sure that you had that connection that you needed with God.
It was, yeah, daily. Yeah.
Well, I know it was daily, but I'm just saying without qualifying all that to these people who are just simply listening, your season then versus your season now looks different with your personal time
Mhm.
with the Lord. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you love him less.
Nor am I connected less. Right. Yeah, for sure.
So just to further piggyback that particular reference point,
Yeah.
as we go through different seasons, there's going to be different needs. And it doesn't make prior times irrelevant or less significant. It's just we're going through different iterations at different times and they change or evolve or maybe have not existed before and now they do. But I think for me, I just want to articulate in order for you to be a powerful person, you are 100% responsible for you, and nobody will or can do that but you. And so getting good at that allows you to be better equipped and adept spiritually, but definitely emotionally,
Mhm.
and to the level that you're willing to let a spouse into that. And within reason, I would even say our kids into that is the level of connection that we can feel. Because the 50-50 conversation can go in a couple different directions
Yep.
with other topics like attachment styles and limbic systems and all the things.
Mm, those darn limbic systems.
Do you need any other departing thoughts for the bow?
Yeah, I would just say if you're interested in learning how to connect more emotionally and spiritually, that's what we're passionate about.
You
Um,
are launching a self-worth course.
yes, I'm launching a self-worth course February 17th. Mhm. Tuesday night, 6:30 to 8:30 Central Time.
I
That's 8
just
weeks.
started one. So all that being said, we will consistently offer these courses often in tandem
Mhm,
so that if you are in a relationship, you have the capacity to do that at the same time. It's not a requirement,
mhm.
but we do recommend it when somebody reaches out. Anytime that couples can do work, whether it's inherently together, what this does do, we share, is it gives you common language. So specifically, again, a couple sessions ago, we talked about power and control games that we do in that session. But there's ways that you begin to better articulate what you're experiencing,
Uh,
and that becomes part of your ability to help the other person hear you
mm.
or see you, therefore know you.
Yeah, I think it was a game changer just to get really specific about what I was doing whenever I was afraid that was operating out of power and control. And so then being able to recognize it and say, oh, that's again, I want to be a powerful person. I don't want to be somebody that does operates like this. And so yeah, and we say this often, it takes 2 healthy people to have a healthy relationship, and so if both individuals can get healthy, then your relationship's gonna be healthy, and then you're gonna model something completely different to your kids, which is what we're also passionate about is equipping healthy families, and
Right.
so yeah, so I would just say reach out and, even if you missed the self-worth course, reach out and there's some yeah, get some the healing you're worth and so you can connect on a level that you were created to connect.
For sure. Stay tuned. We have a whole conversation coming on the happenings for 2026 because we do have some fun ones. So circle back.